Welcome to Parenting Unfiltered, a Parents Lead podcast. We bring expert guidance and simple real-life tools to help you support your child's behavioral health. I'm your host, Sara Kapp, and today we're joined by Missi Baranko, a mom of 4 and seasoned family support advocate who's helped countless North Dakota families navigate the early years. Missi currently serves as the Executive Director of USpire, and she blends real-life parenting experiences with practical tools for helping families build routines that stick. We'll talk small wins, warning signs, and where to find support and resources so kids can thrive well beyond the first day. Missi, you have a unique perspective as a mother of 4. What can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a mom and in your profession?
Yeah, so I was one of those young adults that could not wait to become married, have children. And when we had our first daughter, really quickly in her development in her life, I started to recognize some of the things that maybe I thought should be happening that weren't. And just really began asking a lot of questions to which I felt like was told that not to worry. I was overreacting. And as she grew and developed, we found out she actually did have a brain disorder, and those things that in my gut I was worried about and wondering why she wasn't doing were correct. And so it really, having maybe my first child, having some of those needs and learning really quickly how to advocate and for her and continue to ask questions. And I always tell families, trust your gut. If you think something is not quite right, keep going. Really, I think helped to shape our parenting style and our parenting journey as we had 3 more children, all girls. And really helping them to think about, like I said, the advocating and standing up for them, but also what do they need, right? So when our first daughter was diagnosed with a disability, thinking about how do we help her to grow into a young adult that has independence, shaped all of our children, right? Because the things that we were doing for her, we could also do for them. And then it also led me into a space of supporting other parents. So I was offered opportunity to have some leadership on advisory committees as a parent of a child with disabilities, and then offered a paid position as what was called an experienced parent, is recognizing that those experiences that we had as a family could help support other parents. And so for many years, I worked in a paid position that was my role, is sitting with other parents in their journey of parenting, more specifically around kids that had developmental delays or disabilities, and helping to just sit with them in that difficult space, but also advocating and helping them understand systems and processes, and just being a parent with maybe a little more challenging barriers in that space.
Do you find that it was helpful kind of in your professional career as a parent? Number one, with 4 kids, that's a lot to manage. But in your professional career, do you think that kind of helped pave your way as a mom of 4, but also having children with different needs?
Yes, I think definitely. And I think I having to learn those things and how to advocate and really understand processes and systems and who to ask, I think gave me a different lens that now in my professional career, where I'm all immersed in early childhood spaces, really can appreciate that space and know what it's like to have to, as well as I think in that professional lens to sit at tables with professionals and say, let's remember what it's like to be a parent who may be going through some of these things, right? Like as professionals, I've had different education and schooling. You can learn all those best practices and practical things, but until you really think about what is it like in that family home, what other barriers are they facing, what challenges might be happening, versus just giving strategies on here's how to do something. So it's always sitting back and thinking of that and thinking about the other family pressures that might be happening within that family dynamics. Like, is everybody on the same page in the family, right? Or are there different values happening with that family while you're also trying to raise a child who might have some different needs, or that you're really trying to work on something specific and there's different perspectives? And how do we as professionals support those perspectives and honor those values?
Yeah, I think that's great. One thing we always talk about too is families are so different. What works for one family might not work for the next. And so being able to take your expertise, your lived experience, and kind of helping families as they have those special needs, and just being able to focus on what they need individually in their household is a huge benefit, I think, to you too, having that lived experience. So that's great. And what did that in-home coaching, once you got the supports within your home, what did that look like from your perspective? on a day-to-day basis and when they came into your home to help?
Yeah, so we are blessed. Multiple of my daughters had some developmental delays. One specifically has a brain disorder and disabilities that will probably impact her for many years. So we had home visiting and through a variety of different programs, but people came into our home and essentially coached us on how to support our child, our daughter and daughters as they went through. And it was really just sitting next to us. I was actually just this weekend talking to my youngest who had some speech delays, and she was also a very tenacious toddler, and she just refused to allow me to get her dressed. She threw tantrums and all those things. And we were just laughing at that. She's now 20. And I was saying, I remember she didn't like the transition in the morning of getting up and getting dressed. She didn't like the transition at the end of the day of putting pajamas on. It was like the change all the time. And that home visitor, that person who sat next to me came in our morning routine, right? Came at 7 a.m. And normally I would just think, okay, we got to go and wrestle her down and work through this. And she many weeks in a row came and sat with us. How do we help her to handle this transition better, right? So it wasn't a tantrum every morning and we're all in tears and everybody's upset. And allowing us to, okay, here's what we're going to do. So she'd coach us through, okay, what are we going to do? What's our strategy? And what I loved about it, and I can still see the couch in the room at that moment, is her helping to hold me accountable to that strategy. Okay, try it again. And it ended up working, right? And kind of gave us the empowerment of like, okay, sometimes as parents, we have to be consistent, right? And just keep trying where it's really hard in the morning routine. We have to get out of the house. We have to go. And so help to just support in a way that allowed us to make the decisions and the plan, but was there to kind of help hold accountability with a lot of empathy and understanding and support. And that's how it was throughout those years. We were part of the plans, part of making those decisions. What do we want to work on?
So when they came in and kind of helped you walk through those different steps that you could do as a parent and be consistent with that, did that kind of help, as you had your other children too and kind of had the tools in your tool belt, or do you feel that it was kind of different for every child?
I think it definitely helped us to reflect. Sometimes you're like, I am doing that. Ask somebody, what would you do about this? And they're like, I tried this. Oh, I've tried that. Did we really? Or did we give it the full try? Or did we become exhausted as a parent, which is typical and normal. And sometimes you just have to say, we're not working on that today. And it might be difficult. But I think it helped us a lot to reflect, like, are we doing the things that we need to do and should be doing to help our child? But, we think about it a lot. I think about kids who struggle with behavior, and we have sometimes these really high expectations. We want them to sit through a meal we're going to go out to eat as a family. And we want them to sit there and quiet, but have we done all the steps and to teach them how to do that? Or are expectations too high, right? So sometimes they would say, that's not an expectation that's developmentally appropriate for your child, right? We want that, right? But to have them sit for an hour might not be appropriate. And so helping to balance that, and I think was really helpful as a parent.
Yeah, I try to remember that too as a mom of two girls, understanding what my expectations and what probably is reality for them is way different. And so just kind of realizing that they're still growing and learning and, they're not even sitting through, an hour of unannounced talk or something like that is hard for them sometimes, and trying to put myself in their shoes and understand their capacity. So I definitely understand that it's different too for every kid. So what made it doable for you with, dealing with 4 kids, 4 different needs, 4 routines? How did you handle all of that?
So first I should say it's messy sometimes, right? And it's never 100%, right? I think of parents now, like, you might nail it many days and then all of a sudden you have a day or a week that's just off and things are happening, or they're not feeling well, you're not feeling well. And so, but I think that consistency in that routine, we became a family of mini routines and routines built into routines, right? So we always tried to have a mealtime together, for example, but there's routines within that, right? Who maybe is setting the table, who's clearing the table, who, what can the 2-year-old do? What can the 4-year-old do? And having everybody have a responsibility. And a family is a community, right? And we all have a sense of responsibility and need to have responsibility, and seeing kids thrive when they have some ownership of what's happening and choices within that, but building that into the routine so they know what to expect. And then knowing that sometimes it just doesn't work, and having to, as a parent, step back and be like, that's okay. Right. And I think of things like, maybe we had an expectation today and we're going to do something particular and realize, you know what, we're just going to order pizza tonight because we're all tired and we've had a longer day or something happened. And that's okay. We're going to let go of that and we're going to eat pizza on the living room floor and to give yourself grace in that and just reset the next day.
Yeah, I think my kids appreciate the Friday night pizzas just because I'm too tired to cook, but they think it's the greatest thing in the world. So glad I'm not alone in that. But is there ever a moment when you are teaching your child, different tasks through routines to kind of help build that resilience, that you use like some play-based therapy or, play-based interactions that you allow them to learn that resiliency from?
I think a lot of it, we really stemmed on choices, giving them choices, but choices that were both choices we were okay with. And I always think about it's a choice that they need to be okay with too. So I laugh because a natural tendency of a parent, and I know I've done it, is do you want to do this or be in timeout, right? That's not really a choice because it's a punishment and another option. And so how can we frame things with choices? Do you want to wear the blue pants or the red pants? Do you want to eat this or eat that? Or do you want to hop up the steps or walk up the steps? And so giving some choices within those routines all the time, I think help to make where they're feeling a sense of ownership and responsibility and independence, right? And that doesn't matter if, they're 1 or 2 or 16, right? As they get older, teenagers want a lot of choice. And so allowing them to still have that within those parameters of family life. One thing that I remember, especially, I think, again, because we had a daughter with disabilities, it was like always thinking about her independence and how to make sure that she has the ability to be independent adult. And I listened to another parent speak, and she talked about the things that she helped her child. And one of them was around doing their own laundry. And it's one of the stories I tell all the time. I remember thinking, okay, doing your own laundry is an important thing. And so at 7, helped to teach her how to do her own laundry with some support and help. But also, and then each of the other daughters, and then I remember them coming, I don't have any pants. Oh, I'm sorry. Like, did you not notice your basket was full? And try not to rescue, but be supportive, right? And help them to learn those things that, they're going to fall and mess up, and allow them to fall and kind of mess up when it's safe. And then learn from that mistake, right? That is harmless and make them really upset that day or feel really not great, but knowing like in the real world, it's going to be okay, but they're going to learn like, oh, or forgetting something at school. My sister and I talk about this all the time, right? Kids have access to call us all the time. Like, oh, can you bring this? Right. And sometimes we have to be like, no, I can't, right? I can't rescue that moment, because then that helps them to know we have to plan ahead the night before to make sure we have everything or make sure that we have those things. But we also used like a lot of visual things. So I remember setting up visual pictures for in the morning, like brush your teeth and here's a picture, and having some of the kids needed it more than others, right? Some you could just rattle off, go brush your teeth and comb your hair and put your shoes on, and you look and they're standing there with everything. And another child's like, what do I need to do? And so we'd have visual pictures so that they could follow that. So it's helping to give them the tools for independence and knowing that each might be at a different space, especially their ages, developmentally, a variety of things.
Yeah. I really like how you talked about, it can be messy parenting, but also as a child, you think about all of the different things that a child has to learn and process and go through. And I think we're just learning with them. Parenting for a lot of us is new, especially with your first. And as parents are navigating what that might look like and teaching our kids, we all want the best, and just learning what works for one kid might not work for the other one as well. So kind of going back to, as your children or your first child started having some delays, what are some early signs that you were seeing that, you decided that maybe I should reach out for some extra support? Or what would you give parents some kind of advice if they're kind of thinking the same thing on that first step to reach out?
I would always say just keep asking. And sometimes it's finding different people to ask. So, we have a lot of places to go in North Dakota, so obviously your pediatrician ends up being one of the first, but if you're not getting and it's not about the right answer, it's about feeling like you're heard and that they're recognizing that you're concerned and responding to that. But we also have great programs like Right Track, which is a birth to 3 program that supports families with developmental screenings and comes into the home. So they are a great place to answer questions. We have multiple home visiting programs also in that early space. Preschool spaces, childcare providers. So find somebody, or maybe it's a neighbor or an aunt, right? Find somebody that you feel like you can trust. And sometimes it's things like I think with our daughter, I was like, she wasn't using her left hand. And I asked questions and people are like, oh, that's okay. Babies are right-handed early. And now I know very well, like not at 6 months old, right? Or their dominant hands. And so finding someone that will listen and help kind of guide that. But if in your gut, and I know that that's scientific, but you feel like something might not be okay or right, just keep asking. And I think a lot of that when we see, kids a lot of times struggling with social emotional skills and behaviors, right? Of parents just really struggling, like what's going on? What are they experiencing? And feeling overwhelmed and stressed because there's that kind of judgment of someone just thinks I'm a bad parent or my child's a naughty child. And so it's hard to frame that and ask because we feel responsible, right? As parents, like if I bring up something that I'm worried about, what does that reflect on me as a parent that I haven't done right? And so knowing like it's always better to ask questions, than to ignore that or ignore your wonderings.
Yeah, I hear that from so many different parents too. Those early signs that like everything's going to be normal. As time goes on, they'll learn that skill or they'll learn something. But what would you say for those parents that are really just like nervous, just like that? They don't want to take that initial step or feel like the blame on them. So what would you kind of give them for peace of mind just to reach out?
Yeah, I think that the people that are going to support and help really just want the best for you and your family. And I think sometimes we have a stigma of if we ask for help, like for example, of my daughter who had disabilities and my other kids who had some delays, we had someone coming into the home and sometimes we worry about that stigma of, oh, what does that mean for them when they're in first grade? And really it means nothing. It just means that when they were 2, they might not have been talking the way we'd hope a 2-year-old would talk, right? But that doesn't, I always tell people, it doesn't define what it's going to be at 5 or 8 or your family. And so trust in those relationships and try to find someone that you can build that trust with and ask those questions.
So you would mention earlier, Right Track. So if you're a parent who maybe has concerns or doesn't know where to turn, is that a program that parents can turn to for some of that early on screening? And if so, like what was that process? What does that process look like for families?
Yeah. So Right Track it's in North Dakota. It's our child find system, which is a federal dollars come into state, and the state of North Dakota has created the Right Track program for families with kids birth to 3. It's free. Usually it looks like for most families 2 to 3 developmental screenings a year, maybe 4 for their child that comes in. It's someone coming into their home with a really strong early childhood background. The beautiful thing about Right Track is it's for all children. And so it doesn't matter if you have a concern or not. And that was the gift, even with our daughter and other daughters. But our first daughter, a friend told me about it and said, this was so fun. They came in, we got to play, we talked about development. And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And it sounds not intimidating or not, saying something's wrong. But it was through that process then built the relationship for some, them to say, hey, we have concerns. And then to help us direct us to where can we get help for some of those specific concerns. But it's a great program. And we have other home visiting programs too in North Dakota, like Healthy Families and Nurse Family Partnership and Parents as Teachers and Head Starts, that do similar things. So you don't have to have concerns to be part of that. And I really encourage parents or even parent groups. My daughter just had a baby 3 months ago. And so I'm so excited she's participating in other mom groups and parent groups, right? And it's like, go to those things and engage because those are places you can get extra support and ask questions of people that either have a lot of knowledge or other moms or dads or parents that are doing it alongside the same kind of time frame.
Yeah, I think so many times we hear too that it takes a tribe. It really takes a village to parent a child. And so lean on those people too, like you said, that have the expertise, or even a friend, a neighbor, someone that may not have the answer, but can help you find it too. And I think that's really important. Kind of going back to transitions a little bit, what, as a mom, as an expert, what kind of works within your home or worked in your home? Because all of your kids are grown and out of the house now, but as they were growing up, what were your top 3 routine tweaks that you kind of use on a daily, weekly basis, just to make things as smooth as possible within your home?
I think, again, I kind of go back to that routine, but I think about like when all the kids were in school and we had a relationship with the school and the teacher, if there's going to be a substitute. That for us, that was a big transition. Let us know. Even like, can you text me in the morning and just say, hey, there's me a sub, because then we can start preparing whichever child might need that support and say, hey, you're going to have a substitute when you get there, which alleviated some of the anxiety and transition challenges they would have. So it's like kind of forming those relationships within the family, but outside the family too. If you have a child that struggles maybe with transitions or that abrupt change. We also knew, even if something all of a sudden was going to change, instead of saying, no, we can't do that, we have to do this, to just explain to them. And I think as adults, we all want that, right? Nobody wants to walk into work and all of a sudden your desk is in a different place, or all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have a different supervisor today. I mean, we'd all be thrown, but we forget with kids. And I think, they start with as infants and we just take them everywhere and do everything. And we forget that as they grow into toddlers, they want to know what is going to happen, what's going to happen next. And so even using like first we're going to do this, then this. And I know we talked about, I think of sometimes kids, they want to go outside, right? Like my kids always want to be outside, and it'd be like, tomorrow we're going to go outside. And then tomorrow's a blizzard or it's pouring rain. Like, I know we said that, and first this, then this, but we can't today. And just walking through that and helping them to understand it's not a no forever, or this isn't a change forever, but here's what's going to be different about today. Here's what's going to happen. So really kind of creating those routines so they knew and felt safe and secure in those routines, but making sure when the routine changed to have a plan for how we're going to talk about that, and that they would know that helps to make them more resilient when you can't do that, because there's times you can't, right? Someone gets sick, someone has to pick up a child differently that, from school during a time that maybe, it's a friend picking up because mom and dad can't get there, things like that. Like, how can we help them? The more resilient we can make them within the general routines, the better they're going to be able to cope when the really random thing happens.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned the word resilience, because I think too, through all of, correct me if I'm wrong, but through all of that and teaching them like the first and now and then, or for the sequence of events that happen too, is it kind of helps them set up to be resilient. And so what would you say it would look like too for those kids to really build those skills when you're trying to teach them how to adjust, when they don't know that there is a sub and they come home and it just kind of ruins their whole day, or something happens within school or at the home? How do you really teach those resiliency skills if it's already happened?
Right. And so that's a harder thing, right? To teach it in the moment, because their brains might be overwhelmed and stressed. And so none of us learn really well in that space. And I think in that moment, it's helping to get them to that space of calm again. And so a lot of times it's just saying, I hear you. And I understand that was probably really hard. Or asking them, depending on their language and their age, asking them more about, what are you feeling? And can you name that feeling? And so we talk a lot about naming how you're feeling, more than just happy and sad, but frustrated or disappointed, or, those other emotions that sometimes we simplify to just, I'm angry. And it's like, you're maybe not really angry. Maybe it was just really disappointing, or you were scared, right? You didn't know what was happening. And so helping them name that is a great part of when you're in the moment, is just hearing them. A lot of times we just want to be recognized. Someone sees us, whether again, we're 2 or 20 or adults, that someone sees us. And it doesn't, I always think too, because sometimes people think that means we're agreeing. It doesn't mean we necessarily agree with the emotion. We're just recognizing, acknowledging that is their emotion for the moment. And then what could we have done? So even in situations where maybe the child had an incident where something changed, a transition happened, and they fell apart, and maybe they made a choice that wasn't really good, right? Maybe they yelled at someone, or maybe they threw something, or they ran out of the room or the space that they're in. That's not the time to talk about that wasn't the good choice. But once we can talk to them about how they felt and have them in a calm space, then we can say, what maybe would have been a different choice that we could have made. Like, I understand that it felt really disappointing, or maybe you felt really scared. What could we do when we have those feelings? And even sometimes talking about how that felt. So we sometimes can think of as adults we felt something in our stomach, right? Or we felt our shoulders tense up, or kids feel the same things.
Right.
And so helping kids recognize when that happened. And again, it's after the moment when they're calm, because we can't name it then, but it's talking about, how did you feel? Did you notice anything in your body? And sometimes they'll say, like, my hands got really tight, or I could feel my face getting red, or I could feel those things. So then it's starting to help them recognize, when I have those feelings, what can I do? I could go to somebody, or I can mini classrooms and homes even create safe spaces. Like, okay, when I'm feeling this way, I can say, I'm feeling really frustrated to some adult, and then walk away and take a moment, because those feelings are real. And it's teaching kids, but what do we do with that feeling? And how can we respond appropriately when we have those strong, big feelings?
So would that be a good time to then to kind of walk through if it happens again or when it happens again or situations like this? What can you do to, help get you through the day or get you through that moment to, again, work on those resiliency skills?
Yes. And I think the hard thing is, as parents and educators, we might talk it through and then we're like, hey, they've got it. And we expect that the next time it happens, it just flows. And sometimes pieces of it come together. But again, it's kind of, we have this like brain flipping a lid. Like when those moments happen, our brain flips a lid and that executive functioning, those decision-making skills sometimes go out the window. And so the more we practice, and sometimes it's even role playing, right? With puppets or different, you think of kids, like when you talk to them about play, in play, it's narrating with, if they have different figurines, Matchbox, whatever. My kids are older, so I don't know all the characters anymore, but it's role playing that, right? Of sharing or getting upset, and you can role play and they can practice in those ways too. But it's helping them to experience some of those difficulties because we don't want to protect kids from ever experiencing a challenge or a barrier, right? Because then at some point they're going to, and we want them to experience some of those things at a young age in a space that we can help them work through that.
Would you say one of the biggest things too is role modeling, how you're responding? I mean, I'm not perfect. Hopefully others can admit that, but we all lose our cool sometimes. And I try to own up to my feelings. If I yell at my kids or overreact, I try to apologize and just take ownership and not leave it with I'm sorry, but this is why I act like that. If it was them, that I overreacted, but just leave it as owning my own feelings, but role modeling those when I do mess up, what I could have done different. And do you think that plays a huge importance in building child resiliency too?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because it's a hard thing, right? Nobody wants to, especially with our kids, right? We want them to kind of see us often as the person who knows right from wrong and does. But, if it's our children, I think of childcare providers, we often talk about because they're so important in teaching social emotional skills to kids. And I'm always like, you could come in and be like, I had such a frustrating morning, right? Whatever happened, my car wouldn't start or somebody did this. And just sharing that and saying, and I took some deep breaths or, so even modeling. Sometimes it's fun too. When we're coaching parents and educators and childcare providers and is teaching them like, take deep breaths and seeing, I feel really frustrated and just start taking deep breaths. And it's fun too, when we're teaching kids those skills and the kids will help support the adults. Like they're like, I've got this, or you'll see a child say to a parent, take a deep breath, and then that just, kind of just takes away all that anxiety and stress around it. Cause you kind of just have to laugh. Like here's a little 4-year-old reminding me to take a deep breath, and that it's okay. But yeah, definitely, it's good for us as humans to say, I screwed up. But it's really good for kids to see. And again, how do we recover? Right? I screwed up and I shouldn't have done that. And next time, or even asking again, depending on their language skills, how could I have done that differently? And helped you work through that, especially in those tangles we get with kids and those, sometimes we get in that space where we just want to win.
Yeah. I think it definitely helps them even learn and process their emotions too. A lot of times I'm really working on as a parent of saying sorry when I don't respond or do something that I shouldn't have. And my 9-year-old now is really learning about not just saying sorry to say sorry, because that's what adults a lot of times say sorry to your sibling, but really understanding why we're saying sorry and processing that and being able to understand what you did was maybe not right or you responded the wrong way, but understanding what can she have done different,
right?
So
what to do differently. And I also think about sometimes, especially if we have a child that has a lot of challenges with controlling their emotions and behaviors, we get hyper-focused on just always telling what not to do. I think 2-year-olds don't stand on the table, don't do this. And it's like thinking about what to tell them what to do, right? And being very specific. And then when we see them do it, I think of a time I consulted in a childcare space and there was a group of, they were in circle time kind of space, learning about the calendar and there was probably 8 of them. And it's so easy to focus on the couple that are just wiggling and moving. And if you switch it and just say, oh, look, I love how Sarah's sitting on her bottom and she's got her hands in her lap and her ears are ready to listen. The other kids are like, oh, and now Sarah hears I'm doing well. And instead of saying, good job, Sarah, she doesn't know what that is. I was at a soccer game recently of my nieces and there was a person, I assume a parent, but just kept yelling, stop doing that or something like that to the child. And I'm like, but what are they supposed to be doing? Right. And so thinking about how do we tell them what we want them to do in a really specific way. And when we see them do that, giving that instead of saying just good job or great work, being really specific in that feedback so they can hear like, oh, that's what that is. We kind of assume we all know what it means to be good. You tell our kids, be good in church today or be good when we go, but they don't know what does that actually look like and breaking that down.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. Like celebrating almost those small wins, whether it's like you said, sitting during circle time or sitting quietly during church, whatever that might look like for that child. But for you as a parent, what would you see when your children were growing up that really made you feel proud when they did something? And how did you kind of respond to feed into that positive behavior that they would have?
I think probably what makes, I think this is maybe a human thing, us most proud of our kids is when we see them being kind to others, right? Or doing something that's kind. And I think about, they might share or offer a toy or something and just being really specific. Instead of saying, oh, that was so nice, right? But sometimes even pointing out, like, did you see when you offered to help that, your friend, or you shared your crayons, did you see that they smiled at you and that they, whatever behavior that other child had, to help them point that out. Like, this isn't just, oh, you were just nice, but did you see the reaction of the other human with you? And so, I think for many parents, it's seeing them be kind and do things for others.
Yeah. Especially when the world's hard enough as it is, seeing those kind moments, and hopefully that's how they act inside the home and outside the home. So again, that also helps to, I think, if they ever face somebody who isn't as kind, with those resiliency skills that we talked about earlier, they'll have those in their tool belt that they're able to, respond to different
Which is
situations.
Another thing you think of resiliency is sometimes they might have that experience in helping them think what might have been happening. I think of as my kids got older and in school, right? They come home and they're like, so-and-so wasn't really nice, or so-and-so said this. Somebody's just sitting thinking, I wonder what may have happened to them that day, right? Or did they, were they hungry? Were they tired? Maybe they got yelled at that the morning. And so they were just feeling, and so helping them to kind of just always reflect back what might be happening to somebody else that maybe, and that doesn't make it okay, that maybe they said something that felt not nice to you, or they did something. But let's think back to what might be happening for them and offer them some space around that.
So you work with a lot of families, again, you've had 4 children grow up in your home. What are some of those habits or small actions that you consistently did that paid off in the end that you saw good success with?
I think being really intent, having a lot of intent around that engagement with their child, right? And so I think we're in such a space of multitasking. And I, of course, as a mom of 4, there's times you have to multitask, but making sure to find time every day that you're just really intentfully with them, listening to them, looking at them. It's so hard with technology now, right? To just put that down and have that eye contact. And it doesn't have to be a lot. I think just a little bit goes a long ways for a child. I would definitely promote any type of reading and family gathering. I remember when our kids were, reading kids' books, but then we started reading novels as a family. Like one of us would read out loud, and we would, when they're in elementary school. And then I think the next piece is just having responsibility in that home, right? Whether that is picking up some, their own clothes or putting their shoes away or helping to set the table, grows a lot of resilience and confidence and independence, but also just a sense of community and responsibility within the home is so important. And you can find the smallest things, and kids feel really proud of that. And I always think too, it's like helping them to connect to that. Like, why is that important? Right. So, you put your shoes in the right spot, helping them to know it's not like, sometimes we even forget to tell them, thanks for putting your shoes away. Not that it has to be every day, but helping like, thanks for putting your shoes in the basket, because now Dad won't trip over them when he comes home, right? And it's keeping our house safe. So it's again, making those connections of why is this task mom or dad is asking me? Why is this piece important, right? Thanks for watering the plants, because now that plant was thirsty, right? Realizing that it's more about just ourselves, and it's helping everybody be safe and having a comfortable space at home and helping people feel loved and kind. And so it's pulling all those things. So pointing out that as they do that, I think about, again, when I consulted in childcare, there was a little guy that really struggled with the kids would go to the bathroom together and 4-year-olds are getting in trouble and turning water on and pressing the soap. And they're like, how do we help this little one? And so we made him we didn't make him. We asked him, about what he would like to do. And he became like, he dispensed the paper towels, right? And we were like, you are helping everybody keep safe because their hands are clean and now no germs are spread. And he grew from that. Like he had a sense of responsibility. So instead of going in there and getting in trouble with the paper towels and the soap, now he has a job. And now he has a sense of responsibility that's important. And it's more than just a menial job. It's important because it's keeping germs away, right? And that's a big thing. And so it's helping them see that. Like it's not just a task because I told you, but it's something that has meaning to everyone.
Yeah, those are great tips. I think, going back to what you first said too, is just spending time together as a family. I think sometimes as parents, we're so busy, especially if we have multiple kids, there's sports, there's your own jobs or your own personal life too. And then trying to navigate all the schedules is sometimes it's okay just to be present with your family. You don't need to display it on social media to some grandiose thing, but just being present is sometimes good enough. And that means a lot to your children too. And they learn, that connectedness, and they need to feel that connectedness.
Yeah. I just heard something the other day. It's probably not research or scientific, but that family meals are becoming kind of the more important again, that we went through a time in our culture and time where maybe they weren't as important. We're now recognizing the importance, and it's never going to happen every night. I mean, it's rare, right? Because we're busy, but recognizing when we can, connecting and sitting around as a family is also real important. So it's kind of fun to see some of these things that maybe we got distracted with as families in some point, I think between my childhood and now, and that are kind of coming back, and people are recognizing like, I want to make sure I carve out this time.
Yeah, I think a lot of things too, as I valued as a child. Now as a parent, I try to instill too, like family dinner time, that's a non-negotiable. Those phones don't even come to the table. But just spending that time together and conversating, asking, actually talking as a family versus sitting there on, your phones or whatever that might look like, to be too busy to interact, but just open up the dialogue and have some conversations, because kids are so, they're like a sponge. They just learn everything that, you talk about and hear what a parent to a parent talk about, or inside or outside of the home. So I think that engagement with your children is just so important.
Yeah. It's the best thing that we can give them is the sense of time.
So I think we can agree parenting is hard. We've come to that establishment. But what's one thing that you can give parents right now, just a little bit of hope when you think about that next generation of parents or kids?
That they are really resilient. And I don't think we ever want to take it for granted, right? But kids are pretty forgiving, really resilient. There's moments that I will have, I have 4 kids in their 20s, and I allow them to have a moment of like, wow, that was a really bad parenting day. Like I can think back to, a certain moment, and it'll just pop in my head, and reminding myself, but it was framed around a lot of really good parenting, like we're going to have tough days, and we're going to have days that we go to bed and think, wow, that was hard, but to celebrate, hold on to what went well and celebrate that space, because it is hard. And there's no handbook. I mean, there's lots of parenting books, right? But there's nothing that's going to really describe what your children and your parenting style and your household and all the things that are going to happen within that and how to do it well. And so we have to have some resilience as a parent and give ourselves some grace, but keep getting up and just doing our best. And kids in the end see that.
Yeah, almost learning that resiliency as a parent.
Right. Right.
Well, thank you so much, Missi. Is there anything else that you would like to leave us with today?
I don't think so. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.